debate, Mr. Speaker, will perhaps be the last time that the Parliament sits before the end of the calendar year. And so I want to take the opportunity to wish each and everyone and their families a happy, holy, and safe Christmas season. Mr. Speaker, I want to start my contribution to our debate on the estimates of revenue and expenditure for 2024 by congratulating the Minister for Finance and the team at the Ministry for Finance for a sterling job. We should recognize, Mr. Speaker, that the Minister for Finance only assumed this role in April of this year. And so I want to take the opportunity, since I too held that role for a brief period, to also extend my appreciation to the PS, the Deputy PS, and the entire team at the Ministry of Finance, who would have assisted me in my debut presentation of the 2023 budget. Mr. Speaker, we appreciate that the team at the Ministry of Finance and the respective teams at each of the respective ministries have had to work under difficult and trying circumstances. We inherited a ministerial complex that was not fit for human habitation. As we all know, the air conditioning system in that building is centralized. There's very little natural ventilation, and the air conditioning system was not working. That's what we inherited. It meant that the staff had to work in extremely hot and uncomfortable circumstances with poor air quality. That was compounded by the presence of mold, and this does not extend only to the ministerial complex. It extended to the Ministry of Education, and it also extended to the financial complex. In fact, Mr. Speaker, and it's perhaps important for me to start on that, these three buildings could be classified as sick buildings, and they are perhaps symptomatic of the challenge that the public servants faced over the last several years, in that the working environment was one which was sick, and in many instances led to sickness, trauma. Yet, Mr. Speaker, they've had to persevere, and persevere they did, and we are happy to be working with them to address some of these challenges, and they have done a sterling job, despite the difficult circumstances. And so, Mr. Speaker, it is for that reason that the Minister for Finance would have been happy to announce that, given the circumstances under which many of these public servants have had to work, and that includes the entire security apparatus of the state of Grenada, the police force, the police officers, the prisons, the prison officers. What I'm saying about the financial complex and the ministerial complex and the Ministry of Education extends to the national security apparatus. You don't need no engineer to tell you the state of the Grenville police station. A blind man could see that the Coast Guard building burnt and was never repaired. And those are the circumstances in which our men and women who serve Grenada have had to work. So we were happy, Mr. Speaker, to extend a show of appreciation by agreeing to pay to all government employees a one-off 25% equivalent of their salaries, in appreciation of the hard work and dedication that they do in the difficult circumstances that they've had to do it. And so, Mr. Speaker, we didn't have to announce this as part of the 2024 budget, because it's not part of the 2024 budget. It is a payment being made before the end of 2023, and it will be paid with the second of the bi-monthly payments that are paid to government employees. So I want to again extend our appreciation to the government employees all government employees who have worked with us to face and address and find solutions to many of the challenges that we've had to deal with in the year 2023. Mr. Speaker, I suspect many of us may be here this morning anticipating a great showdown. I'm afraid I'm going to have to disappoint Mr. Speaker because, you see, Mr. Speaker, I recall a famous or infamous interview in which I was being interviewed, and may her soul rest in peace, by Ms. Odette Campbell. And as part of that interview, she showed me a video clipping, and she asked for my reaction to the video clipping. And it was a video clipping of a member of parliament engaging in what could only be described as comic relief. And I sat and I looked at the clipping, and I said my reaction was that it was comic relief and it was not worthy of a response, save to smile. And that Parliament should be used for serious business, for business of the nation, for the business of addressing solutions to the many challenges we face. And so the estimates of revenue and expenditure is in essence a set of numbers, but what they seek to do is address in policy form the serious issues that this nation faces. So we will not engage in an exercise in caricature, in parody, in stand-up comedy, or any of the sort. What we will seek to do, Mr. Speaker, is to address the serious issues that we need to address as a nation, not just in 2024, but in the medium term and in the long term. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to start, Mr. Speaker, by thanking the constituents of St. David for giving me the opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to represent them in this honorable House. And while it is by chance, Mr. Speaker, that I became the leader of the National Democratic Congress, and as a result, Prime Minister, I wasn't elected as Prime Minister. I was elected as the Member of Parliament for the people of St. David. And so, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to start my presentation, and I hope I don't take the entire 2 hours to do it. But if I do, I am unapologetic, because I was appointed the MP for St. David. It is the people of St. David I'm here to represent, and it is to the people of St. David that I'm accountable to first and foremost. And so, Mr. Speaker, you will find that not only me, but that all of my colleagues will in fact start their presentations as part of this budget debate, addressing their constituents, the work they've done, the challenges they've encountered, and the plans for 2024 and beyond, and how the budget plays a role in those plans. If we spend all our time speaking to our constituents, then I dare say, Mr. Speaker, we will have done our job, and nothing more can be expected of us. So, Mr. Speaker, when I asked the people of St. David to give me the opportunity to represent them, this document is what I circulated to them. Very small. It said, together, and I want to emphasize together, we will move St. David forward. And this is what I said to them. I'm Deacon Mitchell, political leader of the National Democratic Congress and a son of the soil of St. David, from the village of Petite Esperance. It is my pleasure to serve as your NDC candidate for the parish of St. David in the next general election. I'm a lawyer with 19 years of practice, a father of 2, and I enjoy music, sports, and community engagement that involves uplifting others. The success of others, especially those who succeed against the odds, is one of my greatest inspirations. It is my vision that together we can positively transform the quality of life of everyone living in St. David as we move our parish forward to become the place that we can all be most proud of. Together we will ensure that we achieve, amongst other things, the following. And Mr. Speaker, I only listed 7 things. And I will pick one sentence from this. Building and supporting our schools and communities, sports clubs, community centers. So I will start there, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, since being given the chance to serve the people of St. David, we have renovated the Belial Community Center. We have renovated the Beirut Community Center. The current community center is 90% complete with renovations. We have started work on a community center in Vincennes. We have started the renovation of the Old Wester Hall Mondelez Community Center. Mr. Speaker, that's 5 community centers in 15 months. I will single out Beirut. That was a community center, Mr. Speaker, that we met with 3 or 4 walls upright. It had been in that state since Hurricane Ivan, 2004. No roof, quarter of a building, no community center for the people of Beirut. Mr. Speaker, Vincennes, no community center at all. Belial, a building that virtually was condemned, no community center. Mr. Speaker, I highlight these things because you see, in 10 years, say for the Malmont Community Center, no work was done on community centers in St. David. How are people to meet, to greet, and to move their communities forward if they have no place to meet? And I want to point out, Mr. Speaker, that these initiatives were done in large measure without any central government funding. I want to single out our partners. I want to start first with the Catholic Church, Mr. Speaker. In the case of Belial and in the case of Vincennes, the land upon which the buildings are located, and in the case of Belial, the old building itself belongs to the Catholic Church. And they've agreed to partner with us to allow us to renovate the buildings. The renovation, the funds for the renovation, Mr. Speaker, came, and I'm happy to express my profound gratitude to His Excellency the Ambassador of China to Grenada, because the funds for the renovation of the Belial Community Center came from the people and the government of China. And so I place on public record my appreciation to His Excellency for affording us the opportunity to be able to partner and have the community center retrofitted and made available for use by the residents in that community. So both Vincennes and Belial, Mr. Speaker, we've partnered with the Catholic Church. So some may come in here and talk about no consultation with social partners, including the churches. We do more than consult. We partner, we work together, and we deliver. Mr. Speaker, the Beirut Community Center was renovated with funds from a private company, the developer in Lever. We reached out to them and indicated that we wish to renovate a building which for the last 20 years stood as a derelict building, a sore thumb in the community. And they happily partnered with us and advanced funds so that we could complete that project. Mr. Speaker, I want to single out the volunteers who worked on many of these projects. In the case of Beirut, Mr. Stewart started the work with no funds, with not being paid for many months, until we were in a position to get some funding right at the end to pay him and his workmen. So I want to pay tribute to him publicly for doing so. In the case of Vincennes, the contractors agreed to work at cost price, no profit or markup to himself. And again, I want to express my appreciation for doing so. In the case of Old Wester Hall Mondelez, again, no government funds. It is funding from another private corporate sponsor who's agreed to assist. So whether it's Citizens Paints Grenada Limited, Mr. Speaker, who happily agreed to donate painting for Beirut and Belial, or whether it's the Chinese Embassy and the government and people of China, or whether it's the Catholic Church, or whether it's the several volunteers, together we have already begun to make a significant difference in community centers in St. David. Mr. Speaker, we intend to focus next year on community playgrounds. As you are aware, Mr. Speaker, or you may not be aware, there are absolutely no playgrounds for children, or for that matter, adults in St. David's, except in private educational facilities. There are no swings. And when we think about that, Mr. Speaker, we ask ourselves, what kind of community have we not been building? And so, Mr. Speaker, we intend to, in a similar vein, partner with the corporate community, with donors, with volunteers, to ensure that we can install playgrounds either at or close to all of our playing fields, so that both our children, their families, and our elderly can have the opportunity to exercise, to spend quality time with their families and their loved ones. Similarly, Mr. Speaker, we will also seek to address the state of our basketball courts, whether they be at the secondary schools or the primary schools, by ensuring that we can erect and install the necessary hoops and nets, the fixing of the potholes and the cracks, so that, again, our young persons in particular have the opportunity to play sports and have access to these facilities. So you see, Mr. Speaker, we are here to represent our community. We are not here to engage in distraction and move along and commerce. Mr. Speaker, skills training, education, and the youth. It was remarked yesterday that the purpose of the Imani program was to address the large numbers of young people who come out of secondary school and find themselves in no man's land. Well, who had the opportunity for the last 22 years to fix that no man's land problem? I want to provide some context, Mr. Speaker, so that we understand. In 1995, the Honorable Leader of the Opposition became Prime Minister of Grenada. He was 48 years old. I'm 46. He served as Prime Minister of this country uninterrupted except for one stint, an interruption led by the Honorable Tillman Uncle Tilly Thomas. So let's get this straight. For the last 22 years, save for a 5-year interruption, we've had the same Prime Minister. He must have been aware that our education system was producing people who are given credentials or subjects, and that they were leaving school at the age of 16, not yet an adult, and they were being asked to fend for themselves, and that the only two institutions in Grenada which could take them was NULO, a non-government institution, founded after the fall of the revolution by Bishop Sidney Charles and other members of the Catholic Presbyterian Methodist Church, to help address the challenge posed by the collapse of the revolution and what is now T.A. Marichaud Community College, what was previously known as IFE. That was known. So we knew that each year we were producing hundreds of students who had subjects, no skills, no exposure to skills training, no exposure to technical and vocational skills training. And instead of seeking to address the fundamental root problem, which is our education system, what we sought to do is put a plaster on it by creating the Imani program, which ultimately leads to a situation where people are locked in, receiving $700 for 8, 9, 10 years, and they have to live on that. And oftentimes, when they go into that program, they are dependent on their parents, and then they go and have children. So you have 3 generations of persons who are locked into a cycle of poverty, simply because we are not addressing the root cause of our education system. So, Mr. Speaker, we recognize that change doesn't come overnight, transition doesn't come overnight, And anything that's worth doing is hard. And so, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Education and his team have begun to introduce technical and vocational education and training in primary schools. Mr. Speaker, we have said we will move the mandatory school leaving age to 18 come effective September 2024. Why are we doing that? It means, Mr. Speaker, we recognize that allowing you to leave school at 15 and 16 years old, when you are not an adult, with little or no exposure to skills training, puts you in a position where you are almost unemployable, and you therefore become unemployed, and you quickly fall into the category of the youth who are poor. And so it is society's obligation, or obligation, to ensure that we take steps, fundamental steps, to addressing that. And so moving the school leaving age to 18 is one of the many steps we have to take in order to achieve this reversal. 2, making it mandatory that all our students have exposure to technical and vocational education from primary school right throughout secondary school up to 18 years is also such a significant step. It must be done, Mr. Speaker. The issue of skills training is not unique to Grenada. It plagues the Caribbean. It actually plagues the world. In a conversation with the ambassador of China, he indicated that China faces the same challenge. Even advanced economies faces the same challenge. The education system has become outdated and outmoded for the realities of our time. And so we need to fix that. And so in the case of St. David, Mr. Speaker, which will be replicated in other parishes, we have already begun to do significant work and engage in significant discussions with, for example, NULO and the National Lotteries Authority, so that we can not just talk, but get funding, identify the locations, and begin to work on the curriculum to ensure that the people between 16 and 18 have access to technical and vocational education. Mr. Speaker, I also want to address something else in relation to education. You see, Mr. Speaker, we sometimes pretend that we don't know that there are boys in particular who at ages 11 and 12 don't go on to secondary school because they say they haven't passed common entrance, or CPA as it's called now. And they drop out of school. If you drop out of school at 12 years old, what life are we confining them to? Her Majesty's prison. Because at 11 and 12, if you are not in school, what are you doing? And so, Mr. Speaker, the need to have the technical and vocational training in primary schools also becomes paramount. Because we need to ensure that these young men in particular do not feel abandoned and left out, and that they have the opportunity to recognize that not everybody is inclined to or interested in academics. And that it is our responsibility to give them the opportunities to technical, vocational, and skills training. And that includes, Mr. Speaker, importantly, digital skills. In fact, more than ever, if there is a skill that every young Grenadian must acquire, it is digital skills. If we do not do so, Mr. Speaker, we would be left behind. So, Mr. Speaker, I want us to appreciate that this is a fundamental issue. The governor of the central bank, our own Timothy Antoine Esquire, former long-standing permanent secretary in the Ministry of Finance, in delivering one of his central bank addresses, hammered home the point that he was deeply concerned about our preoccupation with subjects. Our preoccupation with subjects. And then you have 15 subjects and you leave school, and then what? They become obsolete, but you've never seen a fax machine in your life. You can't even send a fax. You can't even type. And Mr. Speaker, I want us to understand that typing replaces writing. If you can't type, you almost can't live in the world. And I'm prepared to bet the lottery that if we go to our schools, we do not teach typing. You will probably have the phone and you do 11111, but you actually do not teach the technique of typing. And so when young people leave school and they come for a job and you say to them, type me something, they can't type. They have no exposure to Microsoft suite of products. They have no exposure to Adobe suite of products. These are prerequisites. It's the equivalent of being able to speak. And our education system is not addressing those issues, Mr. Speaker. So, when we talk about the transformation, Mr. Speaker, and when we talk about change, we never said we were going to change really overnight. You can invent that narrative if you want. We made it clear, Mr. Speaker, that this was going to be a medium-term and a long-term project. And I'm not fighting for myself. We are not fighting for ourselves, Mr. Speaker. We are fighting for the young people of Grenada. You see, Mr. Speaker, what the leader of His Majesty's opposition has to appreciate is that next year he would serve 40 uninterrupted years in the House of Parliament. Do you know what the mean or average age of a Grenadian is, Mr. Speaker? It's 35 years. The average Grenadian is 35 and under. And he served 40 uninterrupted years in this Parliament. So yes, some are wolves in sheep clothing. And some, it is by the deeds you shall know them. So after 40 years, the deeds are known. And we know them. After 40 years, we understand who have the silver tongue and who can be a chameleon and can change at the drop of a hat in the pursuit of one for the road. But, Mr. Speaker, as was so aptly put by the Minister for Finance, we are not giving the Manis one for the road. We are giving them one for their future. So, Mr. Speaker, I go back to those who like to talk about the poor and vulnerable. Let's take a walk through Belial community, as I did last Friday. There's a young lady by the name of Alika, Mr. Speaker, who probably, up until maybe 18 months ago, would never be thinking about being involved in an initiative such as WASH. WASH. To wash your clothes, you need water. To wash your wares, you need water. To bathe, you need water. To cook, you need water. To clean, you need water. To grow your crops, you need water. You need access to water. To ensure that you, your loved ones, the elderly, the young, live in a healthy environment, you need water. It is water more than anything else. More than even soap that gives us sanitation. So yes, Mr. Speaker, we need water. We need access to water. We need sanitation in homes. But Mr. Speaker, if an elderly person has to get up in the rain that fell yesterday and leave a house and walk a 50 feet or 75 feet to use a pit latrine, you tell me you can sleep good at night? If there are thousands of Grenadians who still have to go through this? You're telling me that you would not support, champion, and scream and shout for a program that ends to systematically eliminate the use of pit latrines? So, Mr. Speaker, when we went into Belial, we didn't say, if you vote for NDC, we won't give you a bathroom and toilet on this side, and if you didn't vote for NDC, no bathroom and toilet for this side. We said, go into Belial and identify every person who needs a bathroom and a toilet and access to water. And that includes even taking on those who like to fight for land. Do you know what's the average size of a bathroom, Mr. Speaker, and toilet? 8 by 8. 8 feet by 8 feet. Do you know what the size of some of these homes are? 14 by 16 or 16 by 16. So let's put things in context. 16 by 16 is the size of your home. The bathroom is 8 by 8. The bathroom is half the size of the house. So, Mr. Speaker, in some instances, the house can't even take the bathroom and toilet. We have to fix the houses as well to make sure that the bathroom and toilets are built. In some instances, Mr. Speaker, the living arrangements is such that you have to share the septic tank. And I'm happy to report that the residents of Belai recognize that we have to do this together. That they have to help dig the septic tanks. That they have to share common septic tanks. And they are doing it. So, Mr. Speaker, when we went on Friday, there were about 14 bathroom and toilets being built simultaneously. We expect by the end of January, Mr. Speaker, to have constructed somewhere in the region of 32 to 36 bathroom and toilets. Mr. Speaker, we've just started. This is a pilot. Why? Because there are issues. People complaining this person's squatting on the land, they don't want him to get a bathroom and toilet, etc. But ask ourselves, what's the size of a grave? 6 by 6? Is that what you put you when you 6 by 4? 6 by 4. That's the only thing you need to fight for. So all people need to understand that we have to put these petty differences behind us. You can't be worried about an 8 by 8 spot when the Eternal Lord has one 6 by 4 waiting for you. Let the people have a decent, basic right, water, sanitation, while you're alive. You see them every day, they're your neighbor, oftentimes they're related to you. So, Mr. Speaker, we are not going to encourage not giving people water, bathroom and toilet because of some dispute over 2 feet of land and 3 feet of land. We will help them resolve those issues. That's why we need to do the pilot. That is why we recognize we needed to go to Nawasa and speak to Nawasa about ensuring that there are no impediments in the supply of water to persons who so badly need this. And Mr. Speaker, if we care about our women in particular, the idea that we will be comfortable with our women, and particularly our elderly women, having to leave small homes in many instances and walk at night or in rainy or unpleasant conditions, sometimes down tracks that you guarantee to fall, just to do basic human physiological activities, Mr. Speaker, is not something that we are prepared to tolerate. And so if we spend the next 3 years only doing wash, Mr. Speaker, we would leave office knowing that we help to raise the social and human conditions of the citizens of Grenada. But, Mr. Speaker, we are not alone in this. I want to go on record again to thank the many persons, the many volunteers, because all of the work, the data gathering, are being done by members of the community, by volunteers. And the pilot started in St. David's, but I want to go on record to thank, Mr. Speaker, some of the team members who are not from St. David's. Ms. Marie Benjamin, not from St. David, and is leading the team. Darcina from Soubise, helping to lead the team. And I'm happy they're doing so because it allows them, Mr. Speaker, to go back to Soubise, to go back to other places, and be able to quickly jumpstart these initiatives. Mr. Speaker, many citizens of Grenada have reached out, including citizens in the diaspora, and have indicated their willingness to donate fixtures, fittings, toilets, to make financial contributions. And that is what we mean by together. Because these problems are not problems that the government alone can solve or fix. The government doesn't come and live or bathe in the 8x8 bathroom. It is persons in the community, family members in the community. And so it's important, Mr. Speaker, for us to work together. I trust that this is a national initiative, that all of us, both sides of this house, the business community, our social partners, other NGOs, can rally around to make sure that by 2027, we would have eliminated, Mr. Speaker, the use of pit latrines. As I said, if I have to spend the entire 2 hours on St. David, so be it. Mr. Speaker, I turn to the question of sports. Mr. Speaker, I was very, very happy yesterday in St. Patrick to see the members of Hard Rock honoring their local hero. At least one Mitchell, clearly, Mr. Speaker, had a profound impact on his community. And that Mitchell doesn't have to say that my legacy is secured, because it was in clear and overwhelming evidence yesterday. But Mr. Speaker, there's another Mitchell who likes to talk a lot about sports. Interestingly enough, there's Hard Rock. I haven't seen a soft rock or any other equivalent in Northwest, but we will come to that. Mr. Speaker, my father used to play a lot of cricket. As the children of the deceased Honorable Adrian Mitchell said, they probably didn't take his sporting genes, and I probably didn't take my father's sporting genes either. So be that as it may, Mr. Speaker, I have to be a spectator. But, Mr. Speaker, the state of cricket in Grenada is abysmal. And we need to do something about it. So in St. David, Mr. Speaker, I was happy to support an initiative called Joy's Cricket School. Joy stands for Journey of Youth. An initiative, Mr. Speaker, of members of St. David. Forgive me, I'm going to call some of their names because we need to recognize who are the persons who really make this country work. Jeffrey Telesford, Raphael Book Charles, Natalie Bartholomew, Marlon Klein. What they've done, Mr. Speaker, is agreed to work with the primary schools in St. David's, starting with St. Dominic's RC, current government, to create a cricket academy for primary school children in the area. And real cricket, Mr. Speaker, not tennis ball cricket, not softball, hardball cricket. And they began running this program during the summer. It continues every Saturday. Tomorrow is the last day before the Christmas break. Mr. Speaker, we were able to partner with them through the Ministry of Social and Community Development. And I want to express my profound appreciation to Minister Telesford and Thomas and the Community Liaison Officer to ensure that we obtain from Canada through a Pakistani company, Mr. Speaker, actual complete cricket gear for these young men and women. And so, Mr. Speaker, they are being trained properly in the technique of cricket. I am going to predict, Mr. Speaker, that that school will grow from strength to strength. We are going to be bringing them, thank you, Honorable Member for Northeast and the Ministry of Sports, we are going to be bringing them to the cricket on Thursday and Saturday, Mr. Speaker, or whichever day they can come, so that they see the cricket in action and hopefully they get to meet some of the cricketers. And Mr. Speaker, we have to start at primary school. We can't wait, as they say, till people turn hardback man and woman and try to teach them skills. We must start at the primary school level. And I'm convinced that if we start at the primary school level, and St. Andrew and St. Patrick, which are the other two well-known cricketing parishes, we have to get going. Cricket is becoming an Olympic sport, Mr. Speaker. Not that I have anything against the West Indies, but if we have to go it alone and create a Grenada Olympic cricket team, so be it, Mr. Speaker. But we cannot do so without ensuring that we impart the skills and knowledge to our children starting from the primary school level. Mr. Speaker, I want to single out a national hero, and I'm saying publicly, and I've told him so, I'm going to recommend him for whatever awards we give, whenever we give it. Mr. Ray Duncan. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Ray Duncan has run a cricket coaching clinic for 42 uninterrupted years in St. David's. He has produced over 77 plus cricketers, and they have represented Grenada, Windward Islands, and the West Indies. an unsung hero who goes about every Saturday quietly making his contribution to the development of young men and women in St. David and in Greenland. People come from all over, Mr. Speaker. And he's been doing so largely without any support. So the Minister of Sports, I'm putting you on notice that come January, the support from Mr. Duncans and his team of coaches and their plan to go into the primary school, to revive primary school cricket, Mr. Speaker, will have to happen. And I'm using this as an opportunity, and I've said so to some of our national players, and they've expressed their willingness to come on stream. Afi Fletcher, well, the two Fletchers, male and female, Junior Murray and so on, who we met with, together with Ray and so on. We have, Mr. Speaker, cricket is not just a sport for West Indians. If we understand the significance of what cricket meant in the formation of the Caribbean civilization, we cannot let it die. The same way in which, Mr. Speaker, or Oveko, or Shotney, or Jab Jab is important to us, the same way cricket, for its historical significance, is important to us. I'm not knocking basketball and tennis and all of that, but there was no West Indian basketball or tennis team that went to England and beat the Englishman at his own game, and went to Australia and beat the Australians at a game they inherited from the English. So, Mr. Speaker, we have to understand that cricket made us proud as black people, as people who were coming out and fighting colonialism. And we owe it to our great legends, from Malcolm Marshall, Viv Richards, Junior Murray, etc., to make sure that we invest in our young women and give women and men and give them the opportunity to play cricket. And, Mr. Speaker, there's more money in cricket now than there ever has been. So it's not just the question of the historical significance of it, but the importance of ensuring that we give young men and women alternate or alternative careers. In addition to the subjects, in addition to the other skills training, Mr. Speaker, we need to recognize that sports is a career. But again, if we do not introduce the sport at the primary school level, if we do not train and impart the skills at the primary school level, many a talent will probably go wasted because we did not make the opportunity to give them that chance. So, Mr. Speaker, we will ramp up our support for cricket in St. David in 2024, both via the Ministry of Sports, via public-private partnership, via volunteers, and we expect, Mr. Speaker, again, success doesn't come overnight. Some of us want to give the impression that because the Minister for Mobilization, Implementation and Transformation is helping to ensure that at night people can see the curbs so that they know there's a drain or wall there by painting them in reflective black and white, which is standard practice in any semi-decent country. But when we have no standards and we have no class, it's easy to knock basic things that any civilized country has. That's why you paint it in black and white, so that people can see it, particularly at night, so that they could guide themselves accordingly and remain on the road. But no, you prefer to run off the road. So, Mr. Speaker, we have to recognize that success doesn't come overnight. When you go to Form 1 in secondary school, you're not expected to graduate in Form 1. When you enter primary school, you're not expected to graduate in the same grade you entered. You're expected to do your 5 or 7 years, and then you graduate. So, Mr. Speaker, when we talk about things like regularizing the public service, you think this was a problem that was created yesterday overnight? We never said we would regularize the public service in 12 months. We said we would regularize it. And we have begun to do so. And there are countless, hundreds, if not thousands, of government employees who just have to ask themselves this simple question. Ronald Reagan asked the same of the Americans when he was taking on Jimmy Carter. Are you better off today than you were on the 22nd of June, 2022? That's the only question you have to ask yourself. Did you have a pension on the 22nd of June, 2022? For all of those who are with acting Hollywood, Bollywood, and are not confirmed, were you not acting on the 22nd of June? So you see, Mr. Speaker, the idea of peddling this false narrative that we were trying to be magicians, and it's not happening, and the doomsday and the gloomsday narrative that is being pictured, well, that's fine. After 40 years, if you're too long in the thing and you no longer have a positive, hopeful approach to life, give it to Pedro. But don't come with a doom and gloom. What this country demands and requires, Mr. Speaker, is hope, optimism, and the willingness to find solutions. So, Mr. Speaker, the transformation is going to take time. And we've begun to lay the foundations. So we can look at the theme from last year's budget, and we can look at this year's theme. Mr. Speaker, for the hundreds of, if not thousands of government employees who have no government pension, let's be clear, and we're not mincing words. There are established public servants who have a pension. But let's be clear, on the 22nd of June, there was somebody saying if you pay this retroactive pension, and if you continue to pay the pension, the whole place will mash up. Well, we're not in the Gaza Strip, the place ain't mash up. The pensions, the retroactive were paid, and established public servants have their pension. There is no retroactive, there is no attempt to reform, there is no attempt to interfere with the established pensions of the public servants. That is not what pension reform is about. The pension reform is for the government employees, those who are on contract for service, contract of service, Imanis, unestablished, don't have any instrument telling you what your status is. It is for them. They do not have a pension. And we are saying, Mr. Speaker, that we will, with them, work towards having a contributory pension. So that they contribute, the government contributes, and they have a pension. And the aim, Mr. Speaker, is to institute that in 2024. Now, explain to me how anybody who say they love people, they're God-fearing, and they have a heart, and they have empathy, would object to giving these very people that you hired on contract for service and contract of service a pension. So as I said, you know people's actions by the actions, because they've been around long enough, and the public has judged them. That's the difference between me being on this side and them being on this side. So, Mr. Speaker, as part of the transformation, as part of recognizing that pensions are good things, that when you create the fund itself can invest in businesses, etc., etc. That is what NIS is about. So that you can create more wealth, so that the next generation who's coming after have the opportunity to know that when they retire, they have their little kakada to depend on. That is the kind of transformation that we are talking about. These things don't happen with a snap of a finger. And when we spend our time fixing the mess that other people have done, yes, sometimes you cannot implement even the programs you want, because we have to fix the mess that other persons have created. So, Mr. Speaker, let's talk about the macroeconomic circumstances in which this budget is presented. Mr. Speaker, the economy has grown in 2022 beyond the estimated projections. Government revenues have performed better than projected and better than 2022. They won't tell you that, Mr. Speaker, but in the several documents that we've presented, if you go to the estimates of expenditure and revenue, on page 5, Roman numeral 5, just to be specific, recurrent expenditure, Mr. Speaker, is estimated at $699.7 million, 5.8% less than the budgeted amount, and 2.5% less than the column in 2022, respectively. Expenditure, Mr. Speaker, is less because there's greater control over discretionary spending. So when you want to give the impression that you impregnated the Treasury and left it for us, and somehow all we do is reaping the fruits of the pregnancy, Mr. Speaker, let's be real. Let's be real. Let's talk about what happened. There was an 81 million EC dollar grant from St. George's University. That had nothing to do with you. What has to do with you and which you didn't disclose to the good people of Grenada is that you sold Mount Hartman for 40 million US. And last payment, 20 million US was made just before the elections. And that the contract, in fact, gives them the right to buy the remaining piece of land that holds or is known as the Dove Sanctuary. Yes, so 40 million US came into the Treasury. Did you disclose that you sold Mount Hartman? If we know the history of this property and the countless attempts at development over the last 22 years, the fact that the Dove Sanctuary is located there, you will sell that freehold when there's an opportunity for it to be done leasehold. So now, if no development takes place, you've put it in the hands of private people. And what is the next generation of Grenadians to do to try and get development done there? It's now owned by a private developer. Completely, totally. You have no control. You wouldn't disclose that. Did you disclose to the public? You say you impregnate the Treasury. That you took all the money from Petrocarib, over 100 million. You transferred it to the Treasury. But what about the $300 million worth of debt that we owe Venezuela now? Did we talk about that? Venezuela has now become Grenada's single largest creditor. Because you have a situation where a friendly country, Mr. Speaker, offers you a development path. They say to you, we will supply you with fuel on concessionary rates. We give you the opportunity to get fuel cheaper than at the market rate. So that you can then sell that fuel over, make a profit, pay us back, and use the profit for development purposes within your country. What development purposes was the money used for? Why did you not put plans in place to service the debt? But more fundamentally, Mr. Speaker, what all this talk about pregnant treasury is about is the reality of the mindset and what we're dealing with. So we're dealing with a mindset that says, I didn't know Grenadians were actually going to put me out of office. And if I had known that, I would have engaged in wanton spending so that whoever becomes the successor government would have had a hard time governing and making good for the citizens of Grenada. That is what this mindset is about. And I'm inventing it because it's been publicly said and it's on record. That is the mindset. So the mindset isn't about how we govern as a continuum and put things in place so that the next generation of people who govern this country are in a better position to do so. You see, because you think the money of Grenada is yours. That's what it is. So, Mr. Speaker, what we have to appreciate is the fact that if there's nothing else we should do as persons who are entrusted with leadership, is attempt to make it easier for the next generation of leaders. So let's go where they don't want to go, or they didn't have the courage to go. Let's talk about us in this House, parliamentarians, people who are elected to serve the good citizens of Grenada. Mr. Speaker, I was elected as MP for St. David. When I was elected, I had no office. This is a state of Grenada, an independent state. It's going to be 50 years next year. The people took part in an election. They elected all of us on this side, all of them on this side. Perhaps with the exception of my good friend, the Honorable MP for St. Andrew Northwest. Perhaps she'll tell us when she has a chance. We had no offices. There was no constituency office for St. David that I can go to. My predecessor had an office that was serving as NNP office, and I guess his constituency office as well. So for months, I had no place to go to serve the constituents of St. David. The people of St. Patrick East, I know you've probably been a little hard on Brother Cornwall, but he too had the same problem. There was no place to go. And it's compounded in our rural parishes because you don't have any urban centers. In the case of St. David's, there's no town, there's no office buildings. So we had to on our own scramble to try and walk around and identify office. Fight up with and we come to that, fight up with the reality that there's no furniture, no phone, no nothing. So no office. Eventually, Mr. Speaker, when I asked the civil servants exactly what is going on, they said, well, there was CJ's managerial services who had a contract to manage parliamentary offices. And I'll give them credit, they didn't even consult with me. They terminated the contract. So I'll give them the credit, they terminated the contract because they recognize what we are about to face. So, Mr. Speaker, no office. We're supposed to serve our people. Mr. Speaker, MPs, and any MP who is a government minister does not receive any money from the state, whether personally or to do any work. And the public needs to understand that. As an MP, if you're a government minister, you do not receive a dime. Either personally, meaning whether you call it salary, emoluments, or to do anything in your constituency. If you're not a cabinet or government minister, I think you get $1,474. $2,000 now? $1,002. All right, well, $1,200. So what it means, Mr. Speaker, is the four honorable members, the five, on this side get $1,200 a month. The honorable MP, Delma Thomas, also, I believe, gets that $1,200. The MPs here are cabinet ministers, so we get nothing. Let's get that clear first. Nothing. No $1,200, no nothing. So if your citizen meets you and say, boss, gas finished, you can't give me $40 for the gas, you have to find a way to get money. So ask yourself, what we fighting over this election and think for want to be an MP? How are you serving your constituents? This is a state apparatus. This is how we met it. First, you had no office. It took forever to get an office. Second, you get no money whatsoever. So we're talking about MPs. We're going to deal with cabinet ministers in a while. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm not hiding this. I said openly during the campaign that that state of affairs cannot serve the people of Grenada. And Mr. Speaker, you can go to Dominica. You can go to Trinidad, St. Vincent, St. Lucia. You can go all the way up north to the Bahamas. MPs are paid a salary. because they're working for the people. They are given the tools to do their job. And they are given some sort of constituency provision or allowance. And it matters not which side of the fence you sit. So, Mr. Speaker, when I say we owe it to the next generation of leaders to make things easier for them, we now have the opportunity in this House to do so. My namesake had the opportunity for 39 years. It's going to be 40 next year. And 22 years. I'm being told 23 by the next statistician in the House. As Prime Minister. He talked about it as usual. There's videos circulating of him in his younger and more handsome days, talking about the difficulty parliamentarians face with not having any resources, and talking about the fact that when you're on the opposition side, if you try to do in government, they will beat you up. And then when you go back on the opposition side, you then beat up the government, etc. But somebody has to have a little courage, Mr. Speaker. Somebody has to be prepared to do the right thing. And the right thing is not for myself. The citizens of St. David know I didn't get involved in politics because I want to get $5,000 from the Parliament of Grenada. The honorable MP for the town of St. George used to tell me, when I make the first million, then I will come in politics. But he was driving at a point, which is, you have to serve the people. If you're hungry mouth, if you beggy, you could come and be parliamentarian. All kind of people come by you because they know you're hungry mouth. So you see, Mr. Speaker, you're a doctor, you're a professional. That's the point. Because you and I are professionals, we can serve, and people can't buy us. We can serve with distinction. You could sometimes hold a different perspective than the person who leads you and not to worry about what happens to you. But, Mr. Speaker, the reality is, what I'm saying, all members of the House agree with, including the leader of the opposition. You just like to have the ability to manipulate people. And if you don't have, well, Mr. Speaker, on that note, I shall move on. So, Mr. Speaker, the point I'm making is, this debate, and I'm happy to have the debate, I'm happy to have the public involvement. We are not using the House Committee. The House Committee, for those who don't know, is a committee made up of the Speaker of the House, 2 members of the opposition, 2 members of the government. We've said from the time we came into this House that we need to correct the situation where MPs are not paid a salary and where they don't have a constituency provision. We frankly should have done it in the first budget. We intend, and we made our intentions clear that we intend to do it in this budget. The allocation has been made under the vote for Parliament. Mr. Speaker, the House Committee met. We have the minutes. I don't think they confirm minutes as yet, but we have the minutes. The House Committee members, I didn't see that there was a dissent. Agreed. A range was proposed between 5,000 and 7,005. The minute says 5,000 as a recommendation. We proposed a constituency provision to help MPs do their jobs and to address some of the needs of their citizens. The proposal was $120,000 per annum, which is $10,000 per month. And as far as I understand, it was supported and agreed in the House Committee. Mr. Speaker, I want to have perspective here. The $120,000 is not to the MP. This is for him to be able to do work in his constituency. The House Committee, us in Parliament can pass the necessary legislation to address what the funds can and can't be spent on. There's legislation an example, Mr. Speaker, in the Bahamas. Act of Parliament says MP salary is X, MP constituency provision is X, and you can see what the funds can and can't be used for. But I want us to keep things in perspective. This $1,200 that my distinguished colleagues on the other side are getting, do you know what the driver, the Parliament has a constituency handbook here. Do you know what the recommended salary for the driver is? $2,400. So your driver, who you hire, is making twice your salary. The office manager, the research assistant, everybody. The range is, I think, 2005, 2005. And the MP, the one who put up his face on the placard and go all over the place saying, vote for me, let me work for you. Well, if you're on the government side and you happen to have a ministry, zilch. If you're on the opposition side, fight up with your $1,200. Well, Mr. Speaker, we have to be real. And the people don't know that. And instead of explaining that to the people, you come in here and talk about attempts by ministers and MPs to increase their income. And you had the opportunity to address those issues. How are we going to attract, Mr. Speaker, persons to want to serve? Are we trying to pretend that being a parliamentarian or being a government minister is some easy job? Are we trying to pretend that? Are you trying to pretend leading a country is an easy job? Why don't you get up and talk about all the sacrifice and this and that that you made? It's not easy, nor should it be easy. But you have to build the state institutions, Mr. Speaker, that makes it a little easier for the next generation. And that is all what this conversation, this debate is about. So, Mr. Speaker, I will invite the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Finance to publish for the public the salaries of each government minister. I will. Mr. Speaker, when we got into office, I inquired as to what cabinet ministers were paid, and I was supplied with information as to what our former colleagues who were government ministers were paid. And I'm going to go and find it and read it. We discovered, Mr. Speaker, that there was some loose arrangement for ministers and God knows who else to go down in the central police station and take gas. How are you managing this? Who audited it? So I could send my son and tell him full up, and he gone checking all of the cases. So we said, Mr. Speaker, we're not getting into this. No minister is going to take my car and go down in the central station and tell the police put gas in and get into this sort of stuff. We inquired what it is drivers are paid at the Parliament, and we were told $2,400. At the time, Mr. Speaker, they said $600, I think, for gas or traveling allowance, plus this gas, whatever. So, Mr. Speaker, all we did was we said, listen, let us have a simple figure that addresses all of this traveling and gas and what have you. And we aggregated all of it, and it was $2,000. Other than that, Mr. Speaker, we made absolutely no change to the salaries of ministers. Now, of course, you won't come and say, you're thinking about yourself first, blah, 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 blah. That's standard. That's the expected reaction, because for 39 years, that's the sort of behavior you've engaged in. Because with a declared assets of 19 million, obviously, you don't need that. So, Mr. Speaker, that's all that has happened. There's been no increase in cabinet minister's salary. Neither is there any proposal to increase cabinet minister's salary. The budget made absolutely no reference to increasing cabinet minister's salary. And each MP, as was so ably put by the Minister of Finance, whether you're independent, whether you're a backbencher, or whether you're a member of the opposition, you are getting the same thing. You think if the Mitchells were reversed, that would be happening? That's not a hypothetical issue. It's a fact, because it did not happen. If they were interested in empowering members of parliament to serve their people, regardless of which side of the fence you are, those issues would have been long dealt with. So, Mr. Speaker, we recognize we have to build our democracy. We have to build the institution of parliament. We have to build the parliamentary office. Because that's how the system works. It's simple. It's a democracy. One parliamentarian, one majority vote. That's all you need. 51%. And the citizens need to understand that if you're voting for an MP who's handcuffed, both legs and feet, if, for example, you have a supermajority and the Prime Minister decides he is making your MP a minister, your MP can't work. He's not a minister. He's an MP. He or she has no resources. So we are not here to take anything for ourselves. We are not offering anything that the other side isn't getting. And deep down, Mr. Speaker, we all know they support it. They may not be in a position to say so openly. That's fine. We understand the challenges. You know, if you have no change in leadership, democracy is not something that is widely practiced. So we get it. Mr. Speaker, let's go on to another mess that we've had to fix. Now we say we can't create no new projects, and it's all NNP projects. I think the Speaker won't throw some of you all out of the house if you all continue this. Mr. Speaker, the Kawana Bay Hotel. If you exit this building and you look down to Grand Anse, you can see it's a big white monstrosity sitting on perhaps the most picturesque view of Grand Anse Beach. I noticed the leader of His Majesty's opposition wasn't calling the man name. He kept referring to him as the man. But I'll call his name. His name is Warren Newfield. He came here under the auspices of the New National Party. He was given diplomatic status under the auspices of the New National Party. He was assigned to the Miami Consular Office under the auspices of the New National Party. He used to go around and raise money for the New National Party. I have no difficulty with that. This is democracy. You can support who you want. He got approval for a CBI project. This site used to be the Flamboyant Hotel site. It was Crown lands. It was leasehold lands, meaning if you don't perform, the lease can be terminated. They gave it to him freehold. They didn't just give it to him freehold. He didn't have the money to pay for it. So they gave him a government mortgage. They transferred the land freehold, then took a mortgage back on it so he could pay over time. That's okay. I'll leave that. That's all right. Once he paid back over time. On record, the leader of the opposition went around, toured the site, said it was the best CBI project Grenada had, and probably the only private development one at the time. So it was easy to call it the best. In less than no time, the man went from hero to zero. Come in Parliament and call the man a racist and all kind of thing. Why? The Prime Minister and his colleague, who normally is referred to as the faceless, nameless monster, engineered a dispute at the CBI office. Stop processing the man files and grind the development to a halt. Okay, I'm going to say maybe there were legitimate issues with the development. Well, the thing's halfway built. You sit down and you talk and you negotiate and you find some solution. Instead of that, you come in Parliament and you call the man a racist. The man said to you, I'm resigning as your trade ambassador or whatever you appointed me because I'm investing in Grenada. I'm trying to do business. You've brought my business to a halt. So clearly I'd be a hypocrite if I go around the world and saying, come and do business in Grenada because my own business has grown to a halt. So instead of using the opportunity to say, okay, fine, let's calm down. Let's have a discussion. Let's see how we can resolve this matter. You escalate it. You elevate it. You come and you hide behind the walls of Parliament because you have parliamentary privilege and you say, how can I think about the man? Where does that leave Grenada? It leaves us with a project that's stalled. Creative Designs and Construction Company, Mr. Latouche's company, Grenadians were building it. 200 plus employees. Boom, send home. No work. Project grind to a halt. $100 million lawsuit. We gone back in ICSID. You know what's ICSID? The International Center for the Settlement of Investment Disputes. The last time we were at ICSID, do you know who had us there? WRB and GPP against Grenada. We end up with another $100 million, almost $100 million judgment against Grenada. We eventually had to pay somewhere between 60 and 70 million US dollars for the 51% shareholding of Grenada. When it was offered for considerably less at a negotiation table, they rejected it. You know why? We're poor. We can do what we want. So, Mr. Speaker, we were faced with the mess of one, the project grind to a halt. Two, it's a white elephant, literally, on the most beautiful part of Grandin's Beach, at least view-wise, and $100 million up in Washington. Now, after the experience of WRB and GPP, legal fees alone, the cost alone was $6 or $7 million. You think this Mitchell is going to sit and say, let's go and spend another $10 million in legal fees and run the risk of another $100 million judgment against the people of Grenada and then the white building still sitting there with nothing happening? We talk about choices and decision making. That's the choice we face. So, Mr. Speaker, the cabinet took the decision to say to the gentleman, we are not backing out with you. You probably chose the wrong partner to lay in bed with. We are here to govern the country. We need to get this project moving, and we're prepared to sit down and negotiate the difficult task. And that is exactly what we did. And I want to start, Mr. Speaker, I want to start by thanking some Grenadians who voluntarily did work to start the negotiation process. Mr. Richard Duncan, Ms. Leslie Ann Sion, Mr. Hassan Hadid, and Mr. Henry Joseph. They volunteered their time, Mr. Speaker, and spent countless hours negotiating with the developer and other parties to try and bring us closer to where we are. And I'm going to say something, they may not like the fact that I'm saying, but I'm saying it. Mr. Speaker, some of these people I call were not known supporters of the National Democratic Congress. They were known supporters of the other side. But it shows you how we govern for all of Grenada regardless. And we are not afraid to ask you to solve Grenada, whether you vote for us or not, whether your family is long known to be supporting the other side or not. That's how you're going to build Grenada. So, Mr. Speaker, we got to the point where we felt close enough that we could conclude a deal. And I want to thank the Honorable Attorney General who's here with us this morning and her team, and Ms. Andrea St. Bernard, who's an advisor in the Prime Minister's office, for being able to get us to the point, Mr. Speaker, where we've concluded the deal. Yes, we have to pay 22 million US. But who caused it? Who shut the program down? Who shut the development down? Who caused Mr. Latouche to send home his team? That's the mess we faced. So, Mr. Speaker, yes, we had to pay $22 million. I wish I never had to pay. But it's 22 against 100 million. And it's now against 100 million plus interest, 3 or 4 or 5 years later with no development taking place. So, Mr. Speaker, we have since embarked upon discussions with a new developer to take over the site and to get things moving. The complaint was made about we announcing things before it happened. There's something called transparency. We have nothing to hide. So yes, we have been in discussions with a company called Joy des Caribbees. It's French, or JDC. The company is owned by Mr. Naguib Sawari. Mr. Naguib Sawari is the principal owner of the Silver Sands Hotel. We have nothing to hide. We are conducting no negotiations in secret. And we've agreed in principle, Mr. Speaker, that once we sign off, and I believe the Attorney General is here and we are almost there, that we will lease the site, Mr. Speaker, not sell it. That we will lease the site for $8 million US. That we will grant approval for the project to continue as a CBI project and for construction to be completed within 36 months of the signing of the deal. Mr. Speaker, we have also agreed. Now, Mr. Sawari, via another company, was also given a lease, thankfully, by the former administration for the site known as the Rivera site. The Rivera site is the site that is located, if you're facing Cameron Park, to the right of Cameron Park. It's called Rivera because there used to be a hotel there called Rivera, owned and operated by the Nayaks. The site has been leased to another company affiliated with Mr. Naguib. We have agreed, Mr. Speaker, as part of this deal with Koanabe, that this site will be handed back to the people and government of Grenada. And unlike those who thought it was patriotic to sell Cameron Park, we will not sell, dispose, or lease Cameron Park. We will expand the entire area, Mr. Speaker, including the 5 acres that is now Rivera site, and make the entire thing into a national park for the benefit and people of Grenada. We understand, Mr. Speaker, that Brandon's Beach can't only be about hotels. And there has to be green spaces, there has to be community parks, there has to be national heroes parks. Children need an opportunity to be able to ride their bicycles, walk with their grandparents without being run down by a bus or a taxi or a car, as the case may be. So, Mr. Speaker, part of this deal includes amicably, by sitting down and talking and negotiating, getting what you want. Not always ending up in ICSID or in some courthouse and losing. So yes, it's about choice, it's about decision making. So that is the story, Mr. Speaker, and I challenge anyone who has a different version to bring forward. At least I come here and give details. So let me repeat. We are leasing the site. The price is $8 million US. Once the deal is closed off, construction should be completed in 36 months. And fourth, we are getting back the Rivera site, which we will combine with Cameron Park to create our national park. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to spend a little time talking about one other mess we've inherited: the Marketing and National Importing Board. I heard somebody talking about agriculture yesterday. That one actually was a bit of a surprise to me, because last time I checked, it was a clear philosophy that one's father used to farm, and farming didn't lead to prosperity, and so agriculture was no longer a matter of interest. And that personal philosophy also drove the political and policy philosophy. So for a significant time, Mr. Speaker, agriculture essentially has been ignored. And Mr. Speaker, that is not something to doubt or argue about. If you take this country's trajectory over the last 30 years, it has significantly promoted, spoken of, and invested in the services sector, whether it's tourism or the educational services via SG, for example. So systematically, the focus has been not on food security, not on agriculture, but on the services. So if you look at our incentives investment regime, Mr. Speaker, the entire policy has been designed towards promoting the services sector. And there's nothing wrong with that. The question is, why did we not have a twin policy that promoted, supported, and encouraged the development of the agriculture sector, agro-processing sector, research and development, and investment in modern technologies for agriculture? And MNIB is symptomatic of the underinvestment in agriculture. So, Mr. Speaker, we took the hard decision to stop the rot and the bleeding at the Marketing and National Importing Board. So where are we today, Mr. Speaker? The operations have been significantly scaled down, and in theory, it is meeting its expenses. I say in theory, Mr. Speaker, because the government has taken over all of the obligations, essentially, of the Marketing and National Importing Board. The staff would have been severed, and they would have been paid their severance. The government made good on pensions and insurance and NIS contributions that were not being paid for the staff. All of that was topped up by the Ministry of Finance and made good, Mr. Speaker. The significant debt and the arrears of debt at the commercial bank, Mr. Speaker, we have successfully negotiated. Again, this is, Mr. Speaker, the point I'm making, that we sit down and we talk. And you find common ground. We've negotiated with the bank the refinancing of the loan, and the central government has taken over that debt. The interest rate has been dropped. We now have a charge on the consolidated fund, and the sole asset of many significance of MNIB, which is the River Road facility known as the parking house, is now free of any bank charge, mortgage, or lien. We have received the preliminary report, Mr. Speaker, from the consultant. It's an extensive report. We will publish it, Mr. Speaker, once it's finalized, because it makes good reading and it tells us about the entire agriculture sector and the challenges we face and some of the issues we need to address so that food security isn't something I just talked about, but that we can have a plan that allows us to significantly address our food security over the next 3 to 5 years. So, Mr. Speaker, we intend this month, and as we get into January, to work with the private sector to create an entity that we believe should be private sector led with government participation to begin the process of the reimagined Marketing and National Importing Board. And Mr. Speaker, I say this because I think sometimes we think the government is the economy. The government isn't the economy. The government is part of the economy. And we need to be careful to make sure that the government, in fact, doesn't become too big. Because if it becomes too big, the fiscal challenge is going to become larger. And ultimately, we'll be cutting ourselves off at the knee. So we need, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that the private sector is incentivized to get involved in the agriculture, food, agro-processing industry. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to report, I will swing back to St. David's, that I've just been advised by a private investor that he has made a bid for what was known as the Wind Fresh agro-processing facility at Lassages, St. David. And that his bid has been accepted, and that he intends to invest in the agro-processing plant in St. David, so we can start ensuring that all of the fruit, vegetables, and all of the other things that go to waste, we can begin the process of starting to seriously address agro-processing on scale. Mr. Speaker, so we are not joking about agriculture. We are not joking about food security. The Honorable Minister for Agriculture will no doubt give far more details about the several programs that we are talking about. But I want to point out again, Mr. Speaker, just so that we come wrong. We talk about agriculture. What did we inherit, for example, with the government estates? The government estates are some of the largest single tracts of land left for agriculture, and particularly for the young people, because they may not have even heard of some of the names of some of these estates. There's Mount Royal in St. Patrick. There's Granbra there's Bellevue, Grand Bacolet. All abandoned for the most part, Mr. Speaker. In Mongrel, there are few workers who fight it out on their own. The female farm workers don't even have a bathroom and toilet to use. The estate road, overgrown, broken. They have to carry 50, 60 pounds of nutmeg on their back. And in the places where the road has completely collapsed, the men have to take it and go. So don't come here and talk about reinvesting in agriculture. That is the reality that we face. There was an attempt at commercialization of these estates. One was leased to the Gillette family in Trinidad. If you go up there, but I think we met 4 workers there. 2 are doing some honey bee production on their own. The other 2 fight up to pick up nutmegs and so on their own. Absolutely no support whatsoever, Mr. Speaker. So that's the reality. So if you're not taking care of your own government estates, charity begins at home. No farmer is going to believe you're serious about agriculture and about helping them. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to make the point that we are reviewing, as was stated by the Minister of Finance in his speech, our fiscal incentives regime. It's clear it's work for tourism. The hotels are being built, more room stock is being added. We are subsidizing flights to come in, etc., etc. But if we do all of that and then the people go and they have to import all of the food from Miami or Mexico or Brazil, all the chicken, all the beef, all the fresh fruits, all the vegetables, then you might as well not have a tourism industry. Because all of the money circulates between Miami, Brazil, and outside of Grenada. And on top of that, most of these hotels get all kinds of concessions in order to be able to be built and to operate in Grenada. So, Mr. Speaker, we have to reimagine our investment incentives program so that we can target the new industries we want to create and we can target the industries we want to support. Fishing and agriculture clearly are 2 of those that we must do. We expect, Mr. Speaker, that this review would be finished in the first quarter of 2024. We will make the findings public so that we can have further discussions on it and then chart a new fiscal incentives regime that will support, Mr. Speaker, our agriculture in particular, and our agro-processing and food security program. Mr. Speaker, I want to turn briefly to start thanking the various ministries that have been fortunate to lead. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry for National Security encompasses the Royal Grenada Police Force, His Majesty's Prisons, the National Disaster Management Authority. The Prime Minister's Office, Mr. Speaker, is responsible for Home Affairs, Cabinet Office, the Citizenship by Investment Office, the Financial Intelligence Unit, the print tree, I think, between us and finance, the Government Information Service, the Ministry for Infrastructure, Mr. Speaker, includes statutory bodies as the line ministry, like the National Water and Sewage Authority, NWASA, GRENLEC, the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission, the PURC, the Airports Authority, the Civil Aviation Authority, the Transport Ministry, which is part of the Ministry of Infrastructure and Public Utilities, includes the Transport Commission. Mr. Speaker, I want to speak perhaps of some of these lesser known entities, and I will start with the Transport Commission. The Transport Commission, Mr. Speaker, was created by an amendment to the Road Traffic Act. And to some extent, Mr. Speaker, it has created what is known as the Traffic Wardens Program. And it has created the Transport Commission in law. And largely, the 2 areas thus far that the institution has been dealing with is in fact the traffic wardens and the issuance of bus sticker licenses. Mr. Speaker, I met with the traffic wardens. And at the end of the meeting, one of the wardens said to me, "Thank you for not firing us. Thank you for not sending us home." And I admit that I was stumped. Because it meant, Mr. Speaker, that somebody or bodies were clearly peddling the idea to these young men and women, and in particular young women, that somehow this administration was going to send them home or fire them. You see, Mr. Speaker, that is the hallmark of the kind of fear, intimidation, and propaganda that this country has been governed by. Who in their right mind, recognizing the significant growth in the number of vehicles on the road, the fact that the roads themselves hasn't grown, they can't grow. There's no place for them to go. There's houses, buildings on either side. With a significant increase in accidents, who in their right mind will not recognize that the need to regulate traffic is of paramount importance? And if ever, we need to support, train, and ensure that our traffic wardens have the right tools to do their jobs better and to have career paths. Instead, you demoralize them, you intimidate them, and you tell them falsehoods, all because you see them as a vote, as a reservoir of votes. Well, the dam has busted. And they say the truth shall set you free. So, Mr. Speaker, it was clear that the traffic wardens were set free. The days of bondage are over. Your job isn't dependent on who you vote for. Your job is dependent on you doing your work. And we are here to support them. We are here to encourage them. And we are here to give them an opportunity for greater career path. Mr. Speaker, we engaged with them. They let us know what the challenges were, from uniforms to the disrespect from pedestrians, from the challenges with working with the police force. We did a survey with them as to their job satisfaction. What are the things that matter to them? And do you know what mattered the most, Mr. Speaker? What mattered to them was their career path. Where am I going from here? So, Mr. Speaker, we indicated to them that the Transport Commission is newly formed and had not really gotten up in earnest. We are happy to report that the Transport Commission is now fully staffed, as in the commissioners. I want to thank P.S. Ronda Jones and the Commission for the hard work that they've been doing. The Commission is made up of men and women from in Grenada and in the diaspora. You see, Mr. Speaker, we don't talk about those things. When we said we were going to create statutory bodies that we rely on both Grenadians at home and Grenadians in the diaspora, the Transport Commission is a perfect example of that. 3 of the commissioners reside outside of Grenada. But they're on time, they're at their meetings, and they make some of the most significant contributions to the issues that the Commission has to address. So, Mr. Speaker, we have commissioned a study via the Caribbean Development Bank, and I'm happy to say that it was a study commissioned by the prior administration. We're happy to give credit. The draft report is in. It is a report that the public needs to see. It's a report we indicated to the Bus Owners Association, who we also met with, that we will share with them. Because, Mr. Speaker, the issue of public transportation in Grenada is one of the significant structural issues we need to address if this economy is going to take off. People cannot continue to buy vehicles, especially diesel and gas vehicles, and just run the roads. We will end up with gridlock. We We already have it, Mr. Speaker. You can't get to work on time unless you start leaving an hour and a half before. You can't drop your kids at school. We have to address this challenge. There is nothing wrong with public transportation. All of us just run up to New York and jump on the train. Jump on the bus. Same thing in London. In developed countries, people don't drive private transportation. They take public transportation because you need mass transit, you need efficiency to get where you're going quickly. If all of us driving, one vehicle going down to St. George's, the traffic backing up from Cali will come down. That's the truth. If you drive on 730 Springs Main Road, the traffic backs all the way up to Woodlands. And it will get worse. So, Mr. Speaker, the Transport Commission recognizes that this is not just about bus routes and sticker license. As a state, we have to invest and partner with the bus owners to ensure that there is significant investment in the transportation system and that we reimagine public transport in Grenada. That will involve, Mr. Speaker, transitioning to renewable vehicles and electric vehicles. And so, Mr. Speaker, when we talk about our initiatives, we back that with policy and fiscal announcements. So you will observe, Mr. Speaker, that the Minister of Finance indicated in his budget presentation that we will waive all import customs tax duties on electric vehicles. And that the government will begin to lead by example by transitioning its fleet of gas and diesel vehicles to electric vehicles. This is just the start. Our school children. Grenada is a remarkable place sometimes, Mr. Speaker. Our school children go to school on public transportation. And we put them in buses with adults who could be drunk, who could be high, who could be smoking, who could be criminals. Completely at the mercy of adults on sometimes long and prolonged trips. We are not safeguarding the innocence of our children in a situation where from as early as 11 or 12 years, we put them in a confined space in public transportation where all manner of men and women have access to them. And we know, Mr. Speaker, and I understand the bus owners' challenge because, the price of the gas doesn't get cheaper if a child is sitting in the bus. The tire doesn't get cheaper. So we also understand many times because the fear for a child is less, they are sometimes reluctant to take the children, which creates another problem. So, Mr. Speaker, we have to address those issues in a systematic way. So we expect the Transport Commission, in association with the Bus Owners Association, in association with the government, in association with private sector investment, because if we want to transition to electric vehicles, Mr. Speaker, it will need the private sector to get involved. We need to create the infrastructure for electric vehicles. And technology, Mr. Speaker, is not waiting on us. It is not waiting on us. Electric vehicles are here. There are private sector persons who have already written to the government saying we want to put electric charging stations in public spaces. We want to bring in electric bikes. So if we don't put the necessary infrastructure, policies and regulations in place, the private sector, the investors, the businessmen will move on regardless. We may end up with some chaos. So it's important, Mr. Speaker, for us to make sure that we put the regulatory framework in place. So I'm highlighting the importance of the Transport Commission, Mr. Speaker, because we intend to broaden its work, we intend to support its work, and I'm sure we'll be hearing more from the Transport Commission. And I just want to signal, Mr. Speaker, we met with the Bus Owners Association, and they know we are not fighting with them. We see them as essential to this process. They provide a public service, their buses are owned by them. They don't get any government concessions, they don't get any help. All of that is what fuels this dog-eat-dog approach to transportation. The market drives them not to run at night because they are making enough money. That's just the market, right? So we can't tell them you have to run at night. We don't own their buses. We don't give them concessions. So we're not in a position to impose conditions upon them. So we have to be able to work with them, Mr. Speaker, to make sure that we can get to a place where we are working together to solve the public transportation challenge that we have. Mr. Speaker, I want to speak briefly on the Immigration Department. Because again, these are departments that are, in a sense, unsung heroes. I want to thank Officer Joseph, who retired for his many years of service. And just so we know, Officer Joseph is the brother of the former MP for St. David, Oliver Joseph. So both brothers have served the public. I want to commend Officer Purcell and his team who are leading the Immigration Department. They are probably, Mr. Speaker, one of the departments that is leading in terms of the use of technology to begin to leverage greater and more efficient services to the public. So as you know, Mr. Speaker, they run immigration at our ports of entry. They are also responsible for the passport office. Mr. Speaker, we, in 2023, removed the need for us to fill in this little piece of paper when you're leaving the airport, which I think everyone found highly annoying, the embarkation card. We intend, Mr. Speaker, in the first quarter of this year, to have all embarkation cards to be done electronically. This long sheet of paper that you fill out, the days of that are over. And in addition, it's expensive because the airlines no longer print them, and they expect us to print them. And since they're all cards, Mr. Speaker, we are going to move them online. So the contract has already been signed, and we are expecting to have this implemented in the first quarter of 2024. Mr. Speaker, as you may be aware, you can pay for your passport applications online. You can go to pay.gov.gd. You don't need to come into the office. You can pay online. You get your receipt sent to you electronically, and you can get your passport. Mr. Speaker, we intend to move the entire passport application process online. We have gotten Cabinet's approval for the renewal of the contract with CBN, Canadian Banknote, and they would be helping us from a technology process, Mr. Speaker, to lead that process. So it means, in time, your passport application process will be done online, and your payment for your passport will be done online. As you're aware, Mr. Speaker, there are kiosks at the airport, and for Grenadians, when you come in, you don't have to go and see an immigration officer. You can use the kiosk, and you get through much quicker. For countries with machine-readable passports, the United States, England, Canada, Mr. Speaker, the services are going to be extended to them as well. So citizens from those countries can also begin to use the kiosk. Mr. Speaker, as was announced by the Minister for Finance, several Grenadians have complained about the need to have to renew their passport every 5 years. There seems to have been no clear policy perspective as to why the change from 10 to 5 years was made. And Mr. Speaker, we've taken the decision to ensure that the passports go back to 10 years. We have, the only exception we've made is for people 18 and under, for obvious reasons. Your physical features tend to change between you being a baby and perhaps preteen and then during the teenage years. So save for that, the passport will be issued for 10 years, Mr. Speaker. We do have some regulatory matters to sort out, because as you're aware, Mr. Speaker, on the passport form it says if you're 16 years and under, you have to get your parents' consent. We seem to have some, and that's one of the issues we need to work on, Honorable Attorney General. There's still some inconsistencies in Grenada as to when you become an adult and when you don't become an adult. So for example, Mr. Speaker, you know you can marry at 16. Right, which is a very strange thing, but you can't vote until you're 18. You can't drive until you're 18. So, Mr. Speaker, those are things we need to make consistent. If the legal age in Grenada is 18, then I think all disabilities should end at 18. So we likely will have to adjust the passport form as well to ensure that under 18 you get your parents' consent. Over 18, you're in the transition stage to adulthood, and so you can get your passport on your own. Thank you. How much more time I have? 10 minutes?
10 minutes.
Is there any indulgence being granted, Mr. Speaker?
Is there a request, Honorable Prime Minister?
Perhaps for 5 minutes, Mr. Speaker, if it's an indulgence, I don't think I can ask for more than 5 minutes, just to make sure that I wrap up. So I think that would give me 15 minutes, if you are so minded, Mr. Speaker.
Granted, Honourable Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the police. Mr. Speaker, our security and the nation's safety is not something to politicize. It is not something for us to be flippant about. Second, the police as an institution, while it has a role to play in helping create a safe society, as an institution, the police itself can't guarantee or create a safe society. The society belongs to us. And crime and deviant behavior, Mr. Speaker, if it is prevalent, is a reflection of our society, our values, and how we bring ourselves up. So, Mr. Speaker, I will not stand there and hear people attack the institution of the Royal Grenada Police Force when I know how difficult, challenging, and risky the job of a police officer is. We should be thanking every man and woman who offers themselves to serve in the Royal Grenada Police Force. So when you stand here with this hypocrisy and talk about people after 4 months of training are becoming police officers, when under your watch, there are people who never trained and became police officers. There are people who, not one day, never trained, and they became police officers. So, all I would say, Mr. Speaker, is be careful with the kind of worms you want to open. The idea to paint the picture that the police force is demoralized, that the police stations are falling down, that they haven't been repaired. Well, under whose watch did it happen? Who told William Thompson, call him up in, what is called the place of Happy Way, Shedda? Who called him up there when he was Commissioner of Police and told him, you know, you're not my man? And unceremoniously dumped him from the office of Commissioner of Police. That is what obtained when Ian Mitchell reigned. When Fitzroy Biddle was Commissioner of Police, let the police officers tell you what Fitzroy Biddle said. God bless his deceased soul. He, Fitzroy Biddle, is the 16th MP. And that they had to be loyal to that Mitchell. That's what you saw obtain with the Royal Grenada Police Force. So, if after you see so much trouble and constant intimidation, the lack of investment in our security apparatus, the failure to repair, I mean, you just have to drive around and watch the state of the police stations. Did it happen in 2022 or 2023? They've been so for decades. So if after working in some of these appalling conditions, and you realize pension is being paid now, and you made the decision, rightly or wrongly, to retire, who's going to criticize that? I've never walked in the shoes of a police officer. He's never walked in the shoes of a police officer. It is only because they have pension, they can actually be in a position to say, I've served long enough and perhaps it's time for me to move on to something else. If there was no pension, they would have to stay there and grind, because there was never any intention to pay or settle this. So, Mr. Speaker, let's make it clear. I have no interest interfering with the Royal Grenada Police Force. And I'm going to say what people doesn't want to say. There's an honorable MP here whose husband is a member of the Royal Grenada Police Force. Have I done anything? Did I call him up in Laura and say, you're not my man? Oh? You think if the roles were reversed, this was happening? Let's be real. There's Richard Duncan. There's Gemma Bain Thomas. There's Julia Roberts. Maybe the people 40 and under don't really know your track record. But those 40 over know it. The current Commissioner of Police, what was done to him? So let's get it clear. I'm a lawyer by profession. All my life I've interacted with police officers. I respect the hard work they do. I support them. And as Minister of National Security, I will do everything I can to encourage, support, and to help the Royal Grenada Police Force to execute its mandate. I am not interested in the nitty-gritty of who gets promoted and who ain't get promoted. And that's for the hierarchy and the management of the Royal Grenada Police Force and the Public Service Commission. I'm interested in the police officers working and doing their jobs, as difficult as it is. So, Mr. Speaker, we have said strategically the numbers are short according to the management of the police force. They need to recruit more police officers. We will support that. We have said that for institutions such as the Port Authority, who has the ability to pay for its own security, we want back the police officers in the police force. We have said to places like the Airport Authority, if you have police officers there, you can deal with your own security, you can get training from the police, but we want back the police officers in the police force. We have said, Mr. Speaker, that we will begin to install, come 2024, CCTV cameras in hotspots, in public places, to help the police with securing our public spaces and making sure that we're in a position to keep an eye on trouble spots and what is happening. We have said, Mr. Speaker, that we recognize, from the time I've been in office, I've been saying this. Not because I have premonition, Mr. Speaker, because it is clear the trend is obvious. Anybody who's reading the statistics on crime in the Caribbean will see that gun crime is a pandemic in the region, and that it was just going to be a matter of time before it reached our shores. That has nothing to do with the Prime Minister who holds the position of Minister of National Security. It has to do with the fact that we live close to the United States, we're located in a transshipment area, drugs going north or to Europe. And the Americans themselves have said to us, the more drug interdiction there is the higher the gun crime. Because the criminals now are fighting for turf. So when we talk about the need to strengthen our Firearms Act, I'm not apologizing over that. A gun was meant to kill. It is lethal. It has no other purpose. And frankly, the only people who should have firearms are members of the Royal Grenada Police Force. This is not some joke. Firearms are not things to glorify. And there are countless examples right at our doorsteps. If you want to come like Trinidad and Tobago, fine. Everybody now blames, each party blames the other party for the state of crime in Trinidad and Tobago. I'm not going on that route. So I have no intention, Mr. Speaker, of in any way demonizing the Royal Grenada Police Force and not supporting them in their mandate to do their jobs. And we should all, frankly, take a bow and salute the members of the Royal Grenada Police Force for the hard work they do. Mr. Speaker, the prisons. Perhaps more than any other security apparatus has been treated as a stepchild. I just want us to imagine the state of Grenada for a moment. If the 400 inmates, or close to 400 inmates at His Majesty's prison was circulating within this country. So more than the police, Mr. Speaker, the prison officers are the ones whose life every day are at stake. They're operating in a building that was built hundreds of years ago, not meant for the use it has been put over the last several hundred years. And the fact that we have close to 400 inmates is not something we should be proud of as a country. So, Mr. Speaker, as part of our long-term goal, we have to reduce the prison population. We have to have less people going to prison. More people going to prison is not a sign of development. It's a sign of retardation. And when the bulk of them are young and young men, it means our talent, a significant group of productive people, are not being productive. And so, Mr. Speaker, we have to recognize that there has to be significant prison reform and there has to be significant investment in the prison system. It is going to be a challenge, but it is something that we need to address, Mr. Speaker. And it starts with the human resource issues at the prison. The prison officers, the management of the prison, we have been meeting with them. We will continue to do so. It is not going to be easy, but the prison is not a place to play risk with. It is not a place to politicize. It is a place where we need professional prison officers that we support and appreciate the dangerous work that they do on our behalf. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to use the opportunity to publicly thank the Commissioner of Prisons, the management of the prisons, and perhaps more importantly, the junior officers who do the rank and file work every day in keeping us safe so that we can run up and down the country and run our mouths while they go to work late at night, early in the morning, come rain, come shine. So I publicly wish them and their families, and appreciate that some of them during Christmas will be working in the prisons while we home having a nice time with our families. So, Mr. Speaker, as a nation, we have to pay attention to those things. We have to invest in the prison system to reform it, to make it a place where you go last resort, not first resort. That will take planning. It will take a lot of consultation because the building is not fit for purpose. And the building itself sooner or later will become a security risk to us as well. So, Mr. Speaker, since it's 2:03 and I have 2 minutes left, I will say one final point in relation to the security contracts because there's a large increase in the allocation under the Prime Minister's Ministry for security contracts. Why has this happened? Mr. Speaker, when we took office, we knew that there were private security contracts, meaning contracts given to contractors who created security firms or individuals all over the place. Each ministry was issuing security contracts to different people all over, from tourism, housing, education, you name it. In some cases, people were being paid twice because different ministries paying them. There was nobody supervising this, nobody checking, nobody actually saying what's the cost of all of these things. People have contracts. If you go, you can't see them. I discovered, for example, there were contracts for several beaches. I discovered that when Nancy Maguire raised the fact that there was sand mining taking place in Hope. And then I was told there's supposed to be security officers there to prevent that from happening. I was like, really? Who has the contract? Then I was told it's either tourism or board of tourism. That's why I discovered there were security contracts for beaches in Grenada, not just Brandans and BBC. Beaches in the countryside, I agree. But sand mining was taking place in Hope. Sand mining is taking place up the entire eastern seaboard. I'm going to call her name in Parliament. Jenny and her gang are sand mining and stripping the East Coast. And the sea is coming in more and more. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to make the point. Is that, it's 2:05, I think that's the bell that says I need to sit. Well, so Mr. Speaker, I will say this. Thank you very much for the indulgence. All we did was to centralize the security contracts under the Ministry of National Security for obvious reasons. So that first, we can actually know the quantum of money is being paid in security contracts, and second, we can have control over these contractors. Because we are not going to pay people, and when you find out you go on Grand Beach, a contractor, you can't see a security guard anywhere. Right? We have to be able to hold them accountable to make sure that they, in fact, deliver what they've been paid to do. And as you can see, Mr. Speaker, it's not cheap. All right, so, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for the indulgence. I want to thank all the members of the House and those who gathered here for hearing me. I want to end by re-emphasizing that we are here to serve. I could probably speak for the entire day. I haven't touched the Ministry of Infrastructure at all. I believe if I am given the chance to speak again in this debate, that will be the ministry I will be dealing with. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Prime Minister, for your contribution to the budget debate. And I now invite the Honourable Member for St. George South to make his contribution.
Mr. Speaker, I stand in support of the estimates of revenue and expenditure for 2024 as presented by our Minister of Finance, the Honorable Dennis Cornwall. Mr. Speaker, let me start by saying that he did a wonderful job. And I'm very proud of him and his staff. Mr. Speaker, I want to also thank the member or the members of our cabinet. And Mr. Speaker, I want to also thank the members of the opposition for their support. But Mr. Speaker, I was expecting to see 5. But Mr.